Good evening and welcome to my channel. Russia just bombed Ukraine in 8 regions simultaneously and hours before those missiles launched. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stood in front of cameras and publicly humiliated Donald Trump with 5 words. He said, "We have no deadlines, we have tasks." That's it. That's the entire Russian response to Trump's peace timeline. 5 words. And those 5 words just destroyed everything Trump has been building diplomatically for the past year. Let me break down exactly what happened today, why it matters, and what comes next, because this story is far more dangerous than what you're seeing in the headlines right now. Trump told Zelenskyy in a phone call this week, confirmed by Axios and 3 Ukrainian officials, that he wants this war ended by July 4th, 2026, American Independence Day, a symbolic achievement for his presidency. That is 18 weeks from today. And Russia's response was to bomb 8 Ukrainian regions before most people in those regions had finished their morning coffee. This is not a coincidence. This is a message. Let me give you the full military picture of what happened today, because the details matter enormously. The 8 regions struck this morning were Odesa, Zaporizhzhia, Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy, Chernihiv, and Poltava. Look at those regions on a map and you see something immediately. They form a near complete circle around the entire country, covering north, south, east, and west simultaneously. This was not a targeted military operation against specific infrastructure. This was a demonstration of reach. Russia was telling Ukraine, Europe, and Washington at the exact same moment that every single part of this country is within range and no location is safe. The weapons used were Shahed 136 kamikaze drones, Iranian-designed and Russian-produced at approximately $20,000 each, combined with Kh-101 cruise missiles launched from Tu-95 strategic bombers flying over Russian territory. Ukrainian air defense shot down 34 drones and 9 missiles. But the ones that got through caused serious damage. The electricity substation in Odesa that was destroyed serves 180,000 households. A school building in Zaporizhzhia was struck. It was empty because it was early morning, but Russia hit a school. Think about what that means. This is day 1,461 of full-scale war. Russia has now launched more than 7,800 missiles and approximately 19,000 Shahed drones at Ukrainian territory since February 24, 2022, according to the Ukrainian Air Force. The total cost of that campaign exceeds $40 billion by Western estimates, and Ukraine is still standing. That single fact is one of the most remarkable military stories of the 21st century, and it receives almost no attention because the media is too busy covering Trump's diplomatic press releases. Now let's talk about the peace timeline, because the gap between what Trump is saying publicly and what is actually happening on the ground in eastern Ukraine is so enormous, it would be funny if people weren't dying. Trump wants a deal by July 4th. That is 18 weeks. Here is the reality of what he is working with. Russia controls approximately 20% of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory. It has 600,000 troops deployed along a 1,000-kilometer front line right now. It is advancing slowly but consistently in the Donetsk region. The Institute for the Study of War reported on February 23rd that Russian forces advanced in at least 4 separate sectors of the Donetsk front simultaneously over just the past 10 days. The pace is slow, with Russia gaining approximately 0.79% of additional Ukrainian territory in the entire past year. But here is the critical point everyone is missing. Russia is not trying to win quickly. Russia is trying to outlast. Putin's entire strategy is built on the assumption that Western political will collapses before Russian military capacity does. And Lavrov's statement this morning was the clearest expression of that strategy you will ever hear. We have no deadlines. We have tasks. Translation: your election cycles, your political timelines, your approval ratings, none of that exists in our strategic calculation. We will be here when Trump is gone. We will be here when the next president is gone. Ukraine's territory is our task, and we will complete it. That is what those 5 words actually mean, and every analyst in Washington understands it, even if nobody is saying it loudly enough. Here is what Trump's leverage over Russia actually looks like and why it is weaker than the White House wants you to believe. Trump's entire pressure campaign rests on 3 tools: economic sanctions, oil price caps, and the threat of military escalation. Let's examine each one honestly. On sanctions, Trump approved measures against Russian energy companies Lukoil and Rosneft earlier this year. But Russia earned approximately 22 billion euros from gas and LNG sales to Europe alone in 2025. That number will drop in 2027 when the EU's full ban on Russian energy imports takes effect. But right now, in early 2026, Russia is still earning substantial revenue every single day. Russia's war economy is performing better than Western economists predicted in 2022. The ruble has stabilized. Russian defense production has surged to levels that shocked NATO analysts. Russia produced more artillery shells in 2025 than the entire NATO alliance combined. Read that again. The country under maximum Western sanctions is outproducing the entire 32-member NATO alliance in the single most important resource of this war. On oil price caps, the mechanism is failing because India is absorbing redirected Russian oil at massive scale. Russia is selling approximately 2.8 million barrels per day to Asian markets, primarily India and China, at discounted rates that still generate enormous war revenue. And this is the same India that Trump met with this month and publicly praised as an irreplaceable partner. Trump cannot simultaneously call India a great ally and expect India to stop buying the cheap Russian oil that keeps its economy running. He has to choose, and he has not chosen. On military escalation, Trump has assembled a significant military force in the Middle East focused on Iran. That force is occupying America's strategic attention and military bandwidth. The simultaneous pressure campaign against Iran and Russia is stretching American diplomatic and military resources in ways that reduce leverage over both simultaneously. Putin knows this. He is watching the Geneva-Iran talks with great interest because every hour Trump spends on Iran is an hour he is not focused on Ukraine. Now, let me give you the manpower reality because this is the number that ultimately determines whether any peace deal is possible. Russia has approximately 600,000 troops in Ukraine right now. Ukraine has approximately 300,000. Russia is conscripting roughly 30,000 new soldiers every single month. Ukraine's mobilization has been politically contested and socially difficult throughout 2025 and into 2026. Conscription enforcement has caused significant internal tension within Ukrainian society. The arithmetic of attrition on a long enough timeline favors Russia absent a decisive technological breakthrough or a dramatic shift in external military support. Putin knows this arithmetic better than anyone. Lavrov stated it implicitly this morning. And the 325,000 Russian soldiers who may have been killed in this war, the largest losses suffered by any major military power since World War II, according to CSIS analysis released this month, have not changed Putin's calculation. He keeps sending more. Ukraine has lost between 80,000 and 140,000 soldiers killed over 4 years. Both sides have paid a catastrophic price, and neither side has broken. That is the military reality Trump is trying to negotiate around in 18 weeks. Here is what Europe is doing right now and why it matters more than what Washington is doing. Following Russia's strikes this morning, French President Emmanuel Macron convened an emergency call with the leaders of the UK, Poland, Germany, and the 3 Baltic states. The discussion, according to Reuters, included renewed debate about Macron's proposal to deploy European troops to Ukraine in an observer and training capacity. That proposal was initially rejected by Germany and cautious European states when Macron floated it in early 2025. The political atmosphere in Europe has changed dramatically since then. Here is the number that tells the full story. European countries collectively provided approximately 90% of Ukraine's financial and humanitarian support in 2025, according to foreign policy analysis published this week. Germany, Britain, and the Nordic countries provided approximately 95% of European military aid. The EU arranged a €90 billion loan package that finances the Ukrainian state through 2026 and 2027. Europe has already substantially replaced American financial support for Ukraine. The question is whether it can replace American military intelligence, satellite imagery, and air defense systems. That is significantly harder. Poland this week announced it is raising defense spending to 5% of GDP, which would make it the highest defense spender of any NATO member in history. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are all already above 3% of GDP on defense. And Ukraine opened its first drone manufacturing facility in the United Kingdom this week, announced by Ambassador Valery Zaluzhny, the legendary former military commander who now represents Ukraine in London. Ukraine is literally building its war production inside NATO territory. That is a strategic development of enormous significance that is receiving almost zero mainstream media coverage. But European mobilization runs into one brutal reality. Defense procurement cycles are measured in years, not months. Poland can pledge 5% of GDP today, but the weapons, trained soldiers, and integrated command systems that spending produces will not be combat ready until 2028 at the earliest. Ukraine needs them in 2026. That gap between European commitment and European capability is the exact window Putin is trying to exploit, and he is running his entire strategic timeline around closing that window permanently before European rearmament can change the military balance. Now, let me tell you the single most revealing fact from this week that almost nobody is talking about, and it tells you everything about the real state of U.S.-Ukraine relations. The U.S. State Department formally expressed displeasure with Ukraine this week for attacking the Russian port of Novorossiysk on the Black Sea. The reason was not strategic risk. The reason was not escalation concern. The reason was that Ukrainian strikes disrupted oil pipeline operations affecting American corporate profits. Specifically, the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, which moves Kazakhstani oil through Russian territory to Black Sea export terminals. American energy companies, including Chevron, have major financial interests in that pipeline. Ukraine hit a legitimate military target inside Russian territory. The Trump administration's response was to call Kyiv and complain about corporate revenue. Ukrainian Ambassador Olga Stefanishina confirmed this to reporters in Washington on February 24th with remarkable directness. She said this reach-out was not related to encouraging Ukraine from refraining to attack Russian military and energy infrastructure. It was related to the very fact that American economic interest was affected there. That statement is one of the most extraordinary diplomatic admissions in this entire war. The United States government called its ally, a country fighting for its survival, and asked it to stop defending itself in a way that reduced American oil company quarterly profits. That is where the U.S.-Ukraine relationship actually stands in February 2026. And no amount of friendly phone calls between Trump and Zelenskyy changes that fundamental reality. Let me also give you the broader context of what Russia's economy actually looks like right now, because Western audiences have been consistently misled about this. The narrative in 2022 was that sanctions would cripple Russia within months. The ruble would collapse. The oligarchs would revolt. Putin would be finished by Christmas. None of that happened. Russia's GDP contracted by approximately 2.1% in 2022, then grew by 3.6% in 2023, and grew again in 2024 and 2025. Russia redirected its trade from Europe to Asia with remarkable speed. China now absorbs approximately 30% of Russian exports. India absorbs another 25%. The global South as a whole has largely refused to join Western sanctions. Of the 193 UN member states, only approximately 40 have imposed meaningful sanctions on Russia. The other 153 countries are doing business with Russia, buying its oil, selling it goods, and enabling its war economy to function. Putin has built a sanctions-resistant economic model, and it is working well enough to sustain this war indefinitely on current trajectories. 2027 is when things genuinely get harder for Russia as European energy bans fully take effect and U.S. uranium import restrictions kick in. The Kremlin knows this timeline too, which is why 2026 is Russia's year to achieve maximum gains before the economic environment hardens against them. Every missile strike today, every meter of Donetsk territory captured this week, is Russia trying to establish the best possible facts on the ground before 2027 changes the equation. Here are 3 scenarios for where this goes, because the next 90 days will define this war's trajectory for years. Scenario A is a negotiated freeze at 30% probability. Geneva talks on Iran succeed enough that Trump redirects diplomatic energy to Ukraine. Russia, facing the approaching 2027 economic cliff, decides a frozen conflict now is better than a deteriorating position later. A ceasefire is agreed along current front lines. Ukraine does not legally recognize Russian sovereignty over occupied territory, but stops fighting for it. Both sides claim partial victory. Europe provides a security architecture. The shooting stops. This requires Putin to decide the future risk outweighs current gains, and there is very little evidence he has made that calculation yet. Scenario B is prolonged stalemate, with European escalation at 45% probability, and this is the most likely outcome right now. Trump misses his July 4th deadline. He blames Ukraine publicly. He reduces diplomatic pressure on Moscow, but cannot fully abandon Kyiv without triggering a European crisis that damages American interests more broadly. Europe continues arming Ukraine. Russia continues grinding forward in Donetsk at enormous cost. The war runs into 2027 with the economic pressure on Russia gradually increasing. Nobody wins. Nobody loses completely. The war just continues. Scenario C is a Russian breakthrough at 25% probability, higher if American support drops. Without adequate American air defense resupply and real-time intelligence sharing, a specific section of the Ukrainian frontline fractures, most likely northern Donetsk, where Russian pressure has been most sustained. Russia captures a strategically significant city. The psychological and military impact forces Ukraine into emergency negotiations under duress. The settlement Ukraine gets under those conditions is dramatically worse than anything available today. Putin achieves a genuine strategic victory. This scenario becomes significantly more likely with every week that American military support remains uncertain. Here is the bottom line from everything that happened today. Russia bombed 8 Ukrainian regions this morning, not because it needed to militarily. It bombed them to send a message. The message was addressed simultaneously to Trump, to Europe, to Ukraine, and to Russia's own domestic audience. The message was, 4 years in, we are still here. We are still strong. Your timelines are irrelevant. Your deadlines mean nothing to us. We have tasks, and we will complete them. Lavrov's 5 words this morning were the verbal version of those missile strikes. No deadlines. We have tasks. Donald Trump has spent over a year trying to end this war. He promised to do it in 24 hours, then 100 days. Then by summer, the war is entering its 5th year. The UN has confirmed 15,000 Ukrainian civilians killed, with the real number likely far higher since monitors cannot access occupied areas. Up to 325,000 Russian soldiers may be dead. 5.9 million Ukrainians are registered as refugees abroad. Another 3.7 million are internally displaced inside Ukraine itself. And this morning, Russia hit a school. Putin has looked at Trump's July 4th deadline and responded with 8 simultaneous missile strikes. That is not a negotiating partner. That is a country that believes it is winning and intends to keep winning. Trump has 18 weeks to change that calculation. And right now, there is no visible mechanism by which he does it. Drop a comment below. Type A if you think Trump can still force a deal before summer. Type B if you think Russia simply waits Trump out until his political timeline collapses. Type C if you believe Ukraine's military position deteriorates before any deal reaches the table. Subscribe and turn on notifications because this war is entering its most dangerous and most decisive phase since 2022. The clock is ticking.